Tom Braden and I are interviewing Rabbi Meir Kahane, a newly elected member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and a man who is known for extreme actions, if not extreme statements. Rabbi Kahane, Israel now faces a situation of 400% inflation. There appears to be a deadlock, a stalemate between the Likud and labor groups. There may be new elections. Would you really win again in a new election? Could you hold your one seat? Your party represents one seat.
I would hope that there would be an election next week. Not only will I hold a seat, but I'll gain several other seats. The people who voted for me were basically the Sephardic Jews, the young Jews, the soldiers, people from the development towns. And these are people who make up many hundreds.
How many people voted in
thousands.
Israel in the last election?
How many people voted? Well,
how many votes were there overall?
Let me see. There was an 81% of, I guess, about a little over 2 million people voted.
2 million, and you then had 26,000
right.
plus votes.
It was 1.2%.
How do you account for this? You're a well-known figure in the United States. You're a well-known figure in Israel since you immigrated to Israel in 1971. How do you account for this? Aren't you really the representative of a really extremist fringe in Israel?
Hardly, you know, and why should I argue and say it's this, and then you say no, and so on? I think that...
I'm asking you to define it.
Yeah, I'll just tell you this, that I think that people tend to underestimate the masses. I think that we sometimes start to believe what we see on TV, or what writers write, and so on. The fact is that you meet a certain kind of an Israeli who is not going to represent the masses within a decade. The Sephardic Jews who always voted for Begin, and Begin was a myth for them, was a father.
Yeah, but Rabbi Kahane, look, you've got to admit, relevant to Dick Allen's question, that universally you are disapproved of. Mr. Begin disapproves of you. The Labor Party disapproves of you. I don't know whether Shamir approves of you, but I doubt it.
He does.
The President of Israel has spoken out against you. How can you possibly succeed in transporting 1,600,000 Arabs across the sea when everybody detests you?
First of all, Mr. Braden, I think that if someone were to come from Mars and were to pick up the Washington Post and the New York Times and the LA Times and listen to all this nonsense on TV, he would assume everyone hates Reagan. And yet somehow he's the president. We'll see in the next election.
You claim to have inspiration from Zev Jabotinsky, the great Israeli patriot. Do you take your inspiration from him? And if so, how do you justify what appears to be an appeal to violence that you propose to implement as a means of achieving political fame, if you will, or political results in Israel?
Let's get one thing clear. First of all, I am a religious Jew. I'm a rabbi. The inspiration that I have comes from Judaism and Torah. I'm ready to debate anyone at any time. The problem is that no one wants to, because they cannot on this issue. Secondly, I don't want violence. I don't want violence. Who wants violence? However, violence is sometimes necessary. The state of Israel came into being only because of violence. It exists today only because of violence.
And al-Fasam as...
Of course not. Of course not.
But
on the contrary,
saying that your followers would carry weapons.
I am amazed. Events happened. I didn't throw the stones. I didn't call the names. They were the name calling. They were the ones that threw stones.
But there were Jews among them.
My dear fellow, some of my best enemies are also Jews.
Well, tell me, I interviewed Pat Buchanan, who placed Dick Allen taken tonight, and I interviewed 2 of those West Bank mayors that were badly mutilated in a bombing a couple of years ago. Did you have anything to do with that?
You know that I wouldn't say that even if I did. But I want to tell you.
Well, will you deny it?
But I want to tell you that a greater group of PLO Nazi types you have yet to meet.
Tell us about your views of Jesse Jackson. You've been very critical, not only critical, you've absolutely condemned Jesse Jackson, called him an anti-Semite. Is he that?
He's worse than that. He's a Jew hater, he's anti-Israel, and worse than that, he's anti-white, he's anti-America. And
well, what's the difference between being a Jew hater and an Arab hater?
Wait, because it's the same difference between they are two different people.
Wait a minute. You said that Jesse Jackson was a Jew hater. You're an Arab hater.
Oh, of course not. That isn't true.
You're not an Arab hater?
Of course not. I don't hate Arabs. I love Jews.
I
love Jews.
Are Jews better than Arabs?
My dear fellow, I'm an Orthodox Jew, a religious Jew. The Jews are the chosen people.
I don't get the difference between your accusation against Jackson and what should be your self-accusation.
Because Jesse Jackson wants to do away with the state of Israel.
What did he say that? When did he say that?
When Jesse Jackson supported PLO. And he's a clever guy. I mean, he's by far the cleverest of all the Democrats.
Rabbi, you made a statement some years ago.
Mr. Braden, I can't answer Mr. Allen, and you both.
This is pertinent.
Well, then his wasn't pertinent.
Did you make a public statement that you would like to murder Arafat outside the UN building?
Of course not. Of course not. One of our people has said that. However, I would like to murder him at any point.
Any place.
And would you do it?
I can't understand. If this year was 1942, and I got up and I said, we should murder Hitler, would you be angry? I hope not.
What's that got to do with...
if you don't see that, then Mr. Braden, then you are in deep trouble. Mr. Arafat wants to physically do away with the state of Israel. Now, that may not bother you. It bothers me.
Let me ask you this. You're in the United States reportedly to seek money and to raise funds for your cause in Israel.
Yes.
Why do you think that American Jews are closet supporters or will be even open supporters of yours, will give their hard-earned money and treasure for a cause so narrowly based as yours?
Because I know how many of them over the last 18 years have backed JDL, and you'd be amazed how many, and some wealthy Jews, many wealthy ones have. I think that, again, we have a support that most people don't realize.
One final question.
Sure.
You said you wanted people to vote against Mondale. You urged Jews, if they can't vote for Reagan, stay away from the polls.
Right.
Do you approve of our president's peace plan for Israel?
No, of course not.
All right. I want to thank Rabbi Meir Kahane for being our guest on Crossfire. Dick Allen and I will be back in just a minute.